Welcome to Flat Earth Debates Special Edition. I am joined by Sleeping Warrior and Spurs Chemo. How are you doing, gentlemen? Good to have you both.
Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning.
And how are you doing, Spurs?
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening, good evening. So, your mic's all yours. What is it you want to talk about?
Okay, so can you just present my screen so that they see it?
Yeah.
All right, so in the last Hangout, Miles made lots of assertions. Fundamentally, a lot of them are lies. And it got to the point where Nathan stopped me from interrupting him. And after the Hangout, I grilled Nathan and I said, how do we deal with this? Because if he's allowed to literally lie, openly, blatantly, and fundamentally mislead people watching into falsehoods, how do we deal with this? Because if I can't stop him from speaking, he's going to carry on. Now, on the one hand, I want to hear what he's got to say, but on the other hand, I don't want him misleading people with facts that are not true. So Nathan said, "Well, do you want to do a quick correction video or a response so that you get the chance to speak?" And I said, "Absolutely." So what I've done a little presentation, and you don't really need to see anything. It's not visual; it's more audible. So don't worry too much about the size of the screen on the top right-hand corner. What's most interesting, or the point that I want to illustrate in this, is just one example where Miles has lied in the last Hangout, and I can show it, prove it, and put it to bed. Now, there was about 8 lies in that last Hangout. This is the quickest and the easiest one for me to do. And I'm going to go through it. I'm going to show you the lie. I'm going to show you the evidence that supports the lie. And I'm going to show you his intention to deceive the audience. Because Miles knows that this is a lie. And I'm going to show it. I'm going to prove it beyond any doubt whatsoever. Now, it starts when I rage quit. I did rage quit because Miles is telling lies and I can't interrupt. So I rage quit. And then I let him speak. Now, bear in mind, I could have actually sniped him if I wanted to, but I didn't. I allowed him to stay in because I'm not that much of a douche. I wanted him to say enough words to put himself into his own grave. And when I left, this was the point he made. And it's the easiest one for me to address. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to play what was said by Miles. And then I'm going to show the evidence afterwards that shows that he is not just mistaken, but he is intentionally trying to deceive you all. It's not acceptable. So here is Miles' words after I rage quit. And this is what he's trying to describe is his elevation with regards to his claim at 40 feet. Now, this is an attack on both the merit of the claim and the credibility of the claim. The merit of the claim is that it's 40 feet. That's nonsense. And the credit of the claim is Miles himself. So listen to what he says. And the key point is towards the end. It's towards this part here. But I'm leaving this bit in this first part just for the context so that nobody can accuse me of cherry picking. Nobody can accuse me of literally doing anything wrong. So the first bit is context. The final part, and I'll repeat it afterwards, is his claim. And I'm going to prove that he lies.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So this is a still taken on a different camera at the time that we were actually filming. You can see, I hope, that it is near to sunset here. I have a precise time for this photograph being taken, if you like.
Now, he has a precise time for the photograph being taken. And as you can see on screen, that I'm asking him, can he present the photograph time? Because I don't believe Miles. Miles does tell lies. I want to know that he actually took this photo at the time that he did the video. And he says that he can produce it. And I'm asking him to produce it. And at the moment, he hasn't produced it. But I'm sure he will do in time. Now, the reason I asked for it is because we can collaborate and cross-reference it with regards to the tide as it was said at the actual time. And I'm just looking for the citation for it so I can flick it on screen. Bear with me. There we go. So on the day in question, Miles was at high tide, bar 5 centimetres, and it was the highest tide of the week. And from this position, 5 centimetres off high tide, we can make a rough estimate for where it should be based on this fact. Now, Miles and previously said that he didn't have this evidence, but now he's miraculously seems to have appeared with it. But we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt, and we'll accept that what he produces on screen right now is the high tide. I don't agree with it, but we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I've asked for proof, but let's see what happens.
And you can see, it is at the time we were filming, which was a few minutes after high tide. And I've got timestamps for the video timings that we took. As you can see, the water level is still down the pebbles on the beach and not up near to the grass bank or the rocks below the grass bank.
Which obviously is the point. We want to know where the tide actually was. Now, if this is high tide, then so be it. We can make the adjustment. Based on the information that we've got on the tide website, it indicates it's significantly higher than this. Hence why this is in question. Anyway.
This beach here, the pebbles on this beach slope quite steeply. It doesn't look like it could, by comparison with the bank, but there's still so relatively steeply sloped. There is a drop down there of several feet from the rocks down to the high water mark. On the basis of the tide heights and mean sea level, I have calculated.
Notice he uses the word calculated. He hasn't used the word measured. He's using maths to calculate facts. Okay? That in itself proves nothing. Calculations are not evidence. It's calculations. Math doesn't prove things. Measurements do.
That the high tide mark would have been about 1.76 meters below the 5 meter contour line on Ordnance Survey map. So we have 1.76 meters to add to the 10 meters that Ordnance Survey gives us from the 5 meter contour line to the 15 meter contour line. The 15 meter contour line runs pretty much right along the top of this bank here.
So what he's saying is the 15 meter contour line runs right across the top of the bank, and that forms the basis of his calculation for his elevation, right?
Just a little bit down the slope, but not very far. So we can ignore it, that and just say that the top of the slope where the step is here is a 50 meter contour line.
So his position at this point is 15 meters above the high tide, right? That's what he's claiming, right? He's not measured it. He's calculated it using OS. Does anybody really think that's 15 meters? That's 15, 30, 45 feet. No, absolutely. Anybody can tell by looking that is completely wildly wrong. Wildly wrong. But anyway.
And we have 10 meters plus 1.76 meters, which is 11.76 meters, plus the height that the camera was on the tripod. Well, we'll call it a meter, and we'll have 12.76 meters, which works out at just over 40 feet, which was my claim.
I agree. It was his claim. And he's quantified it using Ordnance Survey. And anybody with half a brain can see that that is not a similar height to what he's cited. That is not 40 feet. It's bugger all like that. Nothing like that at all. Anyway, that's his claim. So I agree. That is his claim. Now,
Anthony and Ranty claim to have measured this bank, and that measuring the bank is absolutely fine. I have no problem with that. What they came out with was 20-something feet, 23 feet or something for the bank. Which
what we actually measured it to was 19.5. So we'll come back to that in a sec, but it wasn't 20-something. It was 19 point something.
Is perfectly okay. Happy enough with that. You also have the height down off the beach and the height of the tripod to add to their measurement, which I can't verify because I wasn't there at the time. I've got no idea exactly how they did it, and they haven't presented evidence of how they did it.
Yes, we have, Miles. You've not been keeping up to date with the flat Earth debate. We've done it in the previous hangout, either the hangout yesterday or the day before, and I'm about to do it again for the benefit of Miles because he obviously hasn't been keeping up to date.
But it agrees pretty much with the 40 feet that I claimed. If you add on the step down the beach,
it appears right. Let's listen to what he says again.
But it agrees pretty much with the 40 feet that I claimed. If you add on
it agrees with the 40 feet that he claimed. If you add on the bit at the bottom, 40. Right. So he's claiming that we agree with is 40 feet, right? That is not the position. We've called him a liar based on this already. So we're now going to do it for a second time because Miles is reasserting his lie. He's effectively doubling down, kind of. Nathan will correct me if that's out of context, but he's reasserting his lie, right? We don't agree with you, Miles. You are not at 40 feet. And now we're going to prove it.
The step down the beach.
Right, there's Ranty, top of the hill, and that's exactly where Miles had his tripod in the previous picture. This stick represents the tripod. So the calculation that we're about to do, which involves empirical measurements, not calculations based on Ordnance Survey, actual measurements, includes the tripod height. That's the first point to note. Of about 1 metre.
Oh, the pole needs to be the height of this.
No, it doesn't.
That pole.
It just needs to be straight. So what I'm trying to do here, I'm trying to get a straight line, and then the camera person says that you need to have the poles straight, and I agree. So when we're getting the straight line to measure the distance, at the moment we're just getting the distance, and we'll call it 56.7. We'll round it up to 57 feet, okay, for the hypotenuse. That gives us our first value, and now there's a correction to the vertical aspect of the pole because it isn't perfectly straight. So there you go. Now it's a correction for the pole. And what that then allows us to do is get a measured angle. Now, if you know the hypotenuse and you know a measured angle, from there you can work out the trig, and it will give you the value that Ranty is stood relative to the bottom of this bit here. Now, what I want to say at this point is I'm a foot off the surface of the floor. Where I'm stood, I'm a foot off the surface of the floor. We'll add that back in a minute. So, at this point, we have an angle. We have two angles here. We have the external angle, and we have the internal angle. And we want the internal angle, okay? So as we zoom in, we can see 56 feet is the actual measured hypotenuse. And then using this as a still, anybody can put a protractor up and you can either measure the internal angle, but we haven't got a horizontal yet. So I'll put a horizontal in to make it easy for us. Or you can do it raw and you can measure the external angle, and then you can minus off from 90 this angle, and it'll give you this angle. So it doesn't really matter which one we do. So long as we get this internal angle for the trig, that's all we're interested in. So I'll put the lines in to make it easy for anybody that wants to do it. And all we've got to do at this point is either measure this angle, minus it off 90, or measure the smaller angle, and then it gives you your internal angle. Once you get this angle, and it is a measured angle, it's not calculated using nonsense, it's actually measured. This is trig. This is real world science. This is what they tell us to do. And this is, of course, what Miles should have done. To claim his observation height of 40 feet above the surface of the water, this is what Miles should have done, as Miles adopts the position, which is you must be very accurate with your observer height above water. And I agree. It's not above mean sea level. It's above the water. So you can get a protractor on that, and I challenge anybody to get it anything above 20. This internal angle is 20 degrees, and you can have plus or minus 1 degree for human error. Doesn't make any difference. It's 20 degrees. So with this angle, 20 degrees, and with the measured 56 feet of the hypotenuse, we can then put it into a triangle calculator. And when we do that, to be fair, you guys can't see it clear enough. I'll have to pull up the actual triangle calculator. When we put in the 57 degrees for the hypotenuse, which is edge C, and then A is the angle that we need, so we put in the 20 degrees. And if anybody disagrees with me, feel free, go back and do the measurement yourself. It comes back at 19.5 feet. Okay? So 19.5 feet is that calculation, putting Ranty 19.5 feet above me at that position. So from there, which is where Miles's camera lens was, right the way down to this point where my hand is 19.5 feet above that point. Then you make an adjustment, put a foot back onto it for that. So that bit there, because I've not done it right the way down to the floor level, call it a foot. So then we've got to look at, well, where was the actual water on Miles's picture? And you can see that the water level, according to what he says, and if we trust what he says is true, and I don't trust it, I want him to prove it beyond all reasonable doubt, because that's what his burden of proof is now, because he's a liar. But what value do we add to that to account for the drop in water level? Now, if I was to stand where this water level was, would it be above my head with regard to these rocks? And the answer is no, nowhere near. I would put this between 2 and 3 feet. But what I'll do is I'll double it to give Miles the biggest element of help in his favour as humanly possible. I would not be obscured by my height if I was stood here. It's about 2 to 3 feet max, but I'll give him 6. So we're at 19. We're going to add the foot back for the hand where my hand was. So we'll add the foot back. We're at 20, and then we'll give him 6 for the drop for where he claims the water was. So 19 plus 6 is 25. So we're at 25. We'll give him an extra couple just for the sake of inaccuracies and nonsense that the ballers will argue. 26, 27. Forget it. Let's give him 29, which was the value that I gave him originally when I said at the absolute maximum, Miles cannot be any higher above water than 29 feet. Now remember, Miles is at 40 feet as per his claim. Let's hear what he says.
And they haven't presented evidence of how they did it. But it agrees pretty much with the 40 feet that I claimed, if you add on the step down the beach.
So it agrees with the 40 feet that he claims. Well, I've just shown you that we measured it to 56 feet or 57 feet. We've got the measured angle at 20 degrees. I've shown you that the trigonometry, therefore, means that the highest possible point, well, basically, Ranty is stood 19.5 feet above this point here. So call it 20 when you add this foot back. So 20.5. So you got 20.5 is down to the floor. And then we minus off 6 feet for the tide. Puts it basically at 25, 26, right? That's the most it can be. That's accurate. That's measured, and it's adjusted based on the facts that we've got, based on the evidence. And the only bit that we haven't got that's accurate is the tide, because Miles didn't do it properly. Now, whether he did it accurately or not is yet to be disclosed. We haven't seen proof that this photograph that he claims was indeed taken at the same time as he took his video. I don't believe Miles. He's a liar. I don't believe he'll ever be truthful.
Thing just to make it a bit more concise. You've measured the hill at 20 feet, including a tripod. And he's saying that little slope after the bottom of the hill is enough to give him another 20 feet, to double it. This little bit here that you're circling with your mouse is equivalent to the exact same measured height of the hill. I mean, it's preposterous.
Yeah. For Miles's 40 feet to be accurate, or to be even in the ballpark figure to be roughly accurate, that's got to be 20 feet, which is the same height as the hill that we've just measured at 20 feet. Anybody with half a brain can see that that is nowhere near 20 feet. Miles is lying, literally lying. Now, he claims he's calculated it using OS, right? Miles knows that Al was stood at the bottom with a pole that measured 16 feet. There is absolutely no way Miles should disregard the 16 feet pole in favour of the OS map when it conflicts so massively with it. Miles is simply using the OS survey map because it supports his assertion that we live on a spheroid Earth, and it's to literally confuse the matter. But now, as a matter of measured scientific fact, this camera is 19.5 feet plus an extra foot or so higher than what my fist was down here. That's it, 20 feet. So Miles has got to get another.
So for Miles to say, this 40 foot here is it's a lie.
Yeah, Miles has got to persuade the listening audience, which is what he was trying to do. He's got to persuade everybody that this distance is 20 feet. Now, in other words, equal to the height of the cliff. That's the fact. Okay. Now, me and Ranty have measured it at 19 feet for this cliff, plus the adjustment for the tide, and that's what we said in the show. And most we gave him was up to 29 feet. It isn't anything like 29 feet. It's nearer to 23, 24, 25, depending on what this value is here. And if I stood where that water was so that my feet got wet, I would see that my head would still be above these rocks. So it's less than 6 feet.
It's ironic you said it after you left, so you didn't have a chance to obviously rebuttal that. So he kind of waited till you left and then said whatever he wanted to say, basically, knowing that you wouldn't be able to say anything back to it.
Well, yeah, exactly. So let's just play the last clip for what he says.
But it agrees pretty much with the 40 feet that I claimed. If you add on the the step down the beach.
So does it agree with the 40 feet that he claimed when we've measured the height of the cliff that he's on at 19 feet, 19.5 feet down to my hand? We've added on a foot for the bit below it, and we've added on 6 feet for the tide that is not 6 feet. It's about 2 or 3, but we've added on 6. That puts us to 25, 26 feet. I'll then add another 3 feet just to show that I'm being reasonable or being generous in his favour. That takes us to 29 feet, which is what we gave him in the hangout where we disagreed with him, and he cites that we agreed with his figure of 40 feet. No, Miles, we didn't agree with your figure of 40 feet. We said the maximum you could possibly be would be 29. It's realistically 24, 25, but we gave you 29. Yet you've cited on the show this morning, in front of Nathan's audience, not your own, but even if it was, it wouldn't make any difference. These are your words.
But it agrees pretty much with the 40 feet that I claimed. If you add on...
Does it agree with the 40 feet that you claim, Miles? 19, 5, couple more. It gets up to 29, absolute maximum. You're a liar, Miles. And you only did this because I rage quitted because I couldn't stand your lies. You lied continuously through this whole hangout. We've measured what the height of that lens is no higher than 29 feet off the height of this water, nearer 25. Why would you tell people that we've pretty much agreed with your claim of 40 feet? Miles, it was 11 feet more on your measurements or your calculation than what you actually were. Measured, scientifically measured. 11 feet. That worked out to be 25%. You exaggerated your claim by 25% because you used Ordnance Survey, because it was more favourable to your position, and you dismissed and disregarded the measured 16 feet pole that Al K was stood at the bottom with because it didn't help your case. That's the truth. That's literally the truth. You've lied. This is black and white. If anybody thinks that Miles is credible in any way whatsoever, or is actually at 40 feet, then no amount of evidence will ever prove anything to you, because it's been measured. 19 feet, 19.5 feet it was, down to my hand. Add a little bit for the water, 5, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 feet. Don't care. It takes you to 29 absolute max.
As if we accept
Miles
this
has claimed
picture,
it.
because he didn't actually validate it. He said that he would, and then he didn't. He said, I can give you timestamps for this picture proving that it was the time I took it at. But he didn't actually provide them. And as much as I have not been there, this is something I'll find out for myself, hopefully this weekend, but the high tide measured for that week is the highest tide of the week. And we've seen higher tides than that when there's storms. So if you're going to claim that the high tide is halfway down the beach, it seems a bit farcical when the high tide mark is shown as being literally the highest point it could be in that given week. Every other tide was lower.
Yeah, every other tide that week was lower. These two are the highest. Everything else gets lower and lower and lower. Now, if Miles was arguing that what he actually shows in this picture here at the end, where the tide there, if that was one of these positions, we could then say, well, maybe that's right, because the highest one would be higher, and that would make sense that it would be up to the rocks. But he's not. Miles is saying that the highest tide of the week only goes up to that point there. Now, This is where I'm going to show you one last thing, and then I'll close. If we go back to the hangout, if we go back to this, and we search for high tide St. Bees, and then click on the first result that pops up, this is what we find. Now, all right, it's windy, it's more wavy, but that's where the water level goes up to at high tide. So if you can imagine that this isn't as windy as what you think, then this is the high tide at St. Bees, because it says high tide. Now, is the high tide at St. Bees what Miles is showing on the picture that he shows? And the answer, of course, is no, because relative to the information that we've got, Miles looks like he's presenting this as high tide, but actually we know it's this. And the difference between the two is 7.35 meters compared to 6.6 meters. So it's nearly a meter. So I would argue that that is at least a meter lower than what it should be. And that's why I question whether this tide was really there when he done his video or not. And I don't think Miles can prove it because he didn't show it in his video.
Well, we can
so therefore, it's not going to...
I mean, I'm sure there'll be another high tide there, and I'm going this weekend, so, we'll just look at the tide times, see when the high tide is, go down and have a look, and take a few pictures of what the high tide actually looks like at high tide. Easy.
Yeah. Now, the good thing is, the high tide this weekend is pretty much the same high tide as what Miles was at here, because we've checked it. Now, the interesting thing is going to be is where does the tide actually come to at high tide when we go? Now, the issue is going to be then, it doesn't really make any difference. The point is, Miles has claimed that we pretty much supported his claim. Let's hear it again.
But it agrees pretty much with the 40 feet that I claimed.
No, Miles, it doesn't agree pretty much with the 40 feet that you claimed. It's a fraction of it. It's at best 29, realistically 24, 25, possibly 26. We gave you 29. That doesn't agree with your position, Miles. So the merits of your claim are nonsense. But you've lied about what we did. We did not agree with your claim. We called you a liar because we basically showed that this was not at 40 feet. So your credibility is it's gone. You are telling people lies.
I think Miles he's had to. I think he's fallen to peer pressure with the other ballers. Okay, and he's had to come up with a number. So he kind of stumbled through his answer. He didn't actually show what we were asking for. So I think he's just had to lie, just to settle it and give the border something to hold on to.
Now, remember, we've measured it with a rod to represent the tripod at about 1 meter, which probably that's taller than 1 meter. So we're side on his side. We've measured the hypotenuse. We've done the trigonometry. We've used accurate calculations for the hypotenuse. We've used accurate calculations or measurements for the actual measured angles, and you can all do it. Put a protractor to the screen. You can do it yourself. It's 20 degrees. When you do the maths on it, the trig, you end up with one value and only one value, and it's 19.5 degrees.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You've been there. Miles has been there. So hold on. Miles knows what you know. So obviously Miles is not presenting the full story. So it looks like he's pandering to the ballers. He has to go from the ballers' side.
No. What he's doing is he's applying the ordinance.
You shouldn't have any different results, really. You should.
No, exactly.
He should confirm what you have confirmed, but he's just had to. Like I said, he's fallen to peer pressure, and he's just had to say whatever he thinks. It's pretty much. What is this pretty much, right?
So the reality is Miles is citing the Ordnance Survey map because it's a calculation and it's not a measurement. Now, in essence, you could argue that that's not being dishonest, but he knows that Miles was that Alkay was stood at the bottom with a 16-foot pole, and he's deliberately dismissed that, and he's gone with the Ordnance Survey map instead because it supports his position. So he's actually dismissed evidence contrary to his position in favour of the evidence that supports his position that he knows is questionably wrong. Why would he do that?
Hold on. Why has he dismissed it?
Because it doesn't support his position. If I quickly pull up Alkay's video and I'll show you it. Hang on. Just bear with me while I get to it.
When we use words like he's dismissed it, we can just brush over that, and people don't understand what has been dismissed and why. Why has he dismissed it? Yeah.
Right. Miles was there. Miles knows that Al was stood at the bottom with a 16-foot pole, and he knows that 16-foot pole is a set height, and it's pretty much above water wherever the water level goes. So wherever the high tide actually went to on the day, and he claims it's down here somewhere. Now, if I stand here, am I going to be covered by the rocks? And the answer, of course, is no. He claims it's a few feet. I'll give him a few feet. I don't disagree with that. But he's gone against this. He knows that this is only 16 feet tall. And he knows that that's not that far off the height of the height that he's on. So the only adjustment he's got to make is from the bottom of that pole down to where the water level is. That's it. But he's dismissed that because it doesn't go with his claim of 40 feet of elevation in favour of Ordnance Survey, because that does, for whatever reason, and I'm not trying to debunk Ordnance Survey, but the fact of the matter is that hill width is measured with a tripod at 19.5 feet, and then all you've got to do then is work out what the distance is to the water. Miles has disregarded that, dismissed it, and applied nonsense instead from Ordnance Survey because it favours his cause. Is that honest or is that dishonest?
If it's honest, you've got to accept that what you've just shown there. Go back to Alkay standing there with the pole. You have to accept that what is measured on that pole is equal to what is measured down the beach. In other words, what's in the foreground. So mid-picture, you've got this guy standing holding a pole, measuring a hill with a 16-foot pole. You have to also accept that what is between you and the near foreground is the same height as that hill. Here's it from another angle. Yeah. You have to accept that this part that's being waved over with a mouse now has the same value attributed to it in height as the hill itself. You know, it is ridiculous to assume that that's correct because it can't possibly be.
So just to wrap it up,
But it agrees pretty much with the 40 feet that I claimed.
Does it agree pretty much with the 40 feet that you claim, Miles? No, of course it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
The most we give you is 29. Realistically, it's 24, 25 maybe. No more than that. So it doesn't agree with you at all. So the merits of your assertion are gone, and the credibility of you, Miles. You are a literal liar, and you are totally lying. What you're doing is presenting a lie in a persuasive and very like Tony Blair-esque way to try and deceive your audience and the people that are listening to you at that time. It's nonsense. I tell it the way it is. I say it exactly the way it is, and you're a liar. Prove it wrong, Miles. Go measure it and prove it wrong. Let me help you. If you go measure it and do what you did, it doesn't matter what you will get that value. And then if you correct and get a correct vertical and then get the calculated, the measured angle, you will get that. So when you get it, this value will be 20. Black and white, it will be 20 based on pulling the rope taut and doing it down. And that's basically what we did. You will get 20 degrees. You will get a set value for the hypotenuse. When you do the trigonometry, you will see that is 19.5 feet in height. Ranty is stood 19.5 feet taller than what this joint is here. That's the trig. That's the science. You cannot argue against that. Now, this isn't even my claim. This is Miles's claim on a video that's got nothing to do with my observation video. So for anyone watching right now, this has got nothing to do with my claim. All this is about whether Miles is telling the truth or whether Miles is misrepresenting the height that he's at. Is he exaggerating it? He's not telling the truth. He's deliberately lying and he's deliberately exaggerating. So with regards to my own observation, this has absolutely nothing to do with it whatsoever. However, Miles is out there to try and debunk me, and this is showing that Miles is fundamentally dishonest. This morning, on Nathan's show, Miles showed that he'd gone out with a tape measure, chucked it down, climbed up halfway, pulled it down, claimed a measurement, and then basically that was what he was happy to accept, and Tim agreed. Well, okay. I don't agree with that. I showed that when me and Ranty did it, we actually threw a tape measure down, and I'll show it. I'll just remind for what I actually showed. Just bear with me one sec. It's on. Trying to remember where it is. It is here. So if I go P900, and then there, and then it's which one is it? It's this. It's this one. So when I did it, when me and Ranty did it, so there's the elevation of the second thing. There's the tape measure again, going all the way down, and not only is it going all the way down, you see me at the bottom doing exactly what I did before. So I'm getting a measured angle, calculated angle, and we know what height it is, applying trigonometry. Miles' nonsense that he presented this morning, threw a tape down, stumbled his way down, but basically he left it that confusing that nobody knows.
Took 2.5 minutes for him to explain how he'd taken a measure, and taking a measure should be as simple as saying, I threw a tape measure down, took the reading off it. Instead of that, we got about 2.5 minutes of him explaining how to take a reading off a tape measure, because it wasn't that. He took two readings off two different measures after pulling it down halfway, etc, etc, etc. It wasn't a true representation of the measurement of that hill. It's useful, yeah, we can still bung it in with the averages if we ever need to use them, but ultimately speaking, it was a total fail.
Now, in contrast, again, this is not my claim. All I've done is put the elevation as stated on Google, and the assertion by the ballers is that it was wildly inaccurate, up to 30 plus or minus 30 meters, and they attributed that the maximum value at plus 30 meters against me with no evidence whatsoever. All we were doing was seeing whether there was any evidence to support the assertion that Google is wildly inaccurate. And guess what? No evidence was found. Yeah, it's not bang on. Is it 30 meters? That's 100 feet different to what it actually is. And the answer is no. And that's the reason why I've not released this, because I don't need to. It's not my assertion to prove. It's your assertion as a baller to prove that there is 30 meters of invariance based on what Google Earth says. And it isn't. So Miles has bumbled his way along trying to claim that this, that, and the other with regards to this, and it's nonsense. There is no evidence to support the assertion that Google is 30 meters inaccurate. None. Absolutely none.
Did you want to add anything, Spurs, before we round out?
Well, No, I mean, like I say, you can see it there for yourself, the measurement. Miles is giving it what he pretty much thinks it is. That obviously is either lying or he's just being incompetent.
Yeah, he's lying. He's literally lying. And he claims he's just about the truth. If he was really just about the truth, this is what he should be doing. Not stumbling along and making it out as though it's one thing and it's not. We've measured it. I'm happy and I will reassert my position over and over again. Google Earth is not wildly inaccurate. Oh, and the other thing is, the elevation that I'm at this point, relative to where the water comes up to, I'm below high tide here. The water comes up to past this and goes beyond where I'm at. So I'm not even at high tide marking here. I'm not far off it, but I'm below the high tide marking because we know that the water goes up to the cliffs because there's evidence of receding. The cliff edge is a receding cliff edge. I am below that. So this is fundamentally honest with regards to the accuracy and regards to the science and the trig, and it's not wildly inaccurate. So all those retards like, what's his name, Jeremy, and all those that claim that it is and claim that in some way I'm lying, no, gone out and I've done it. But I'm not going to give you your assertion for you. If you don't like it, tough, go and get it yourself. Don't send Miles because he hasn't got a tape measure long enough. Send two people because you need two people to do it and measure it. And then come back and show us how wildly inaccurate it is. Because guess what? It isn't. So that's basically me done, Nath. I just wanted to show people that Miles is lying, both on fact and on merit. He's lying about what his claim is. He's lying about what we said about his claim. We didn't agree with you, Miles. We showed that you were lying. And I've shown it again today. If you keep coming on Nathan's show and you keep lying, you won't be coming on anymore because I'll stick you on my block list and that'll stop you from coming in if I'm in. It's that simple. If you can't be honest, Miles, you are given... And notice as well, can I just remind people that I didn't actually snipe Miles when I rage quit? I could have done. And believe me, I would have done. I was really thinking about it. But I didn't because I wanted to hear what he actually said. Now, if I had have sniped him, I wouldn't have had him lying. I kept him in because I wanted to hear what he was going to say. I wanted to hear his lies. The guy is lying. You guys can think I'm lying. Fine, prove it. I can prove that Miles is lying. It's the third time I've done it in a week. 3 times I've shown him to be lying, literally lying. Not being wrong, misleading people. Deceiving people with what he knows is false. He knows it's false because Al was stood at the bottom with the stick. He's a liar. He is literally lying to you. But he's presenting it in a way like Tony Blair. Like with the weapons of mass destruction speech that he did. He's presenting a lie very favourably and persuasively. And he's trying to make me look wrong, bad, lying. No, Miles, you're dishonest. And I'm going to keep reminding people of it over and over again. Unless you start being truthful, fair, honest with what you claim are facts. I think that's fair. I stand by my position. I've not changed it and I'm not going to change it because there's no evidence for me to do so. That is not dishonest. Miles?
One last time. You got anything to add, Spurs? And then I will round out this time.
No, I mean, that's about the size of it. Anthony's done all he can. Miles has been down there. He's failed. He speaks for, in my mind, for all the ballers. They were relying on him to come back with something sufficient to end the discussion. So, you know, not to reiterate, but kind of unless Miles has got something honest, then I don't see where Miles can go, where he can go from that.
Cool, I am going to end there. So with that, I'm going to say first and foremost a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of the live audience for tuning in to this special Flat Earth Debate edition. Be sure to like, comment, share and subscribe. I've been Nathan Oakley and I will see you all in the next video.